All right, great. I'll need, when I do my PowerPoint presentation, I'll need to have the ability to share my screen. I don't know if you can activate that on your end.
Councilmember Marcano, this is Councilmember Murillo. I'm on my phone right now, but will shortly transition to a laptop when I can resolve any tech issues. So I'm here.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Alrighty, so we are at 1:02. So let's get this show on the road. Welcome everybody to our June 30th TAPS meeting. My name is Juan Marcano. I have the honor and pleasure of representing Ward 4 and being the chair of this committee. I'll go ahead and pass it over to my vice chair.
All right, hello, I'm Councilmember Ward 5. I have my video off today.
You're breaking up on us pretty badly, Councilmember Coombs. I couldn't really pick up much of what you said.
Try to find out what I said then. But okay, we'll try to find a headset. Thank you.
All right, yes, ma'am. And Councilmember Murillo.
Hello, everyone. Apologies for being off camera right now, but my name is Crystal Murillo. I am a council member representing Ward 1, which is Northwest Aurora, and I am a member of this committee. Thanks for joining.
So next item on our agenda here is the approval of the June 2nd minutes. I do not have any changes. Councilmembers Coombs or Murillo?
No changes.
I was absent, so I'm going to abstain.
All right. So with that, if I can get a copy, I'll get those signed over for the public record. I don't see any items under consent, so let's move us down into general business. So that'll be 4A, the Centennial Airport update. And I believe we have Mike Fronapel with us for this presentation. And Karen Hancock as well.
Yes, this is Mike Fronapel here, Executive Director for Centennial Airport. The share button on here is grayed out, so I'm not able to share my presentation. Are you guys able to turn that on from your end?
Yeah, Tracy should be able to hand you that privilege. I see she has the red icon currently.
Oh,
That's a very cute puppy.
thank you. I'm so sorry. I didn't know I was hosting.
Yeah, you can hand over. Mike, do you have the presentation yourself? Were you planning on running it yourself?
Yeah, I do have it on my end, and if I can get the share privileges, I can just share that screen.
Okay, so Tracy, you should be able to right-click Mike.
I lost everything. Where is it?
And give him sharing privileges.
Oh my gosh.
Always fun with technology.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Here, it's down here.
It's all good.
There we go. Stop sharing.
Okay.
Then I can go up to second or audio video. You share over on the left.
Oh, there we go.
Wait. Oh, no. Okay.
Sorry about this.
All right, looks like I got it. Hold on here. Let me just select the right screen. All right, can you guys see the first page of my presentation now?
Yes.
All right, looks like we're good to go. All right, like I said, my name is Mike Fronapel. I'm the Executive Director for Centennial Airport, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk to this committee and share a little bit about Centennial Airport and what we're up to. I started as Executive Director about 8 months ago. I've been with Centennial Airport for a little over 24 years, starting as an intern here. and then just worked my way up through a couple different departments and ended up being selected as the new executive director last October. So excited to be able to present to you guys. I think I may have presented in my previous roles once before to the committee, but that was several years ago. So just wanted to start here, and feel free, obviously I can't pick up any social cues on this virtual platform, but feel free to interrupt me if you have questions along the way, and then I'll be happy to answer questions at the end of the presentation as well.
Will do. Thank you.
So let's see if I can get this to switch for me. All right, so Centennial Airport, this is our opening day. It was May 12th, 1968 on our main runway there. We actually, when we opened, we were a county airport, so we were Arapahoe County Airport. And then later on, we became an airport authority and expanded our runway, our main runway, into Douglas County. And as a result, we have commissioners from both Arapahoe and Douglas County on our board. This is opening day. We had about 50,000 people show up for that event. As you can see, there's very little development around the airport at that time. Arapahoe Road was a 2-lane dirt road leading out to the airport off the I-25 corridor. And so things have changed quite a bit for us. So a little bit of information on what Centennial Airport looks like today. We have about almost 1,400 acres. We have 3 different runways, and we're open 24/7. We're the second busiest general aviation airport in the country currently, and 17th overall, and that includes all the commercial service airports like SFO and Dallas and O'Hare and Denver here locally. Last year we had 314,000 operations. An operation is a takeoff and a landing, and so there are some days we could have almost 2,000 takeoff and landings, but on an average it's about 900 or so takeoff and landings per day. We have 4 fixed-based operators, and actually this just July 1st, this will change. We're going to be going from 4 to 3. One of our major fixed-based operators, Signature Flight Support, purchased one of the other operators, so we'll be down to 3, but that's still pretty good for an airport. Fixed-based operators provide all the fueling and servicing, and they help out with car rentals, and then also just any servicing the aircraft needs, dispatch, fueling, food, catering for the flights. And so having 3 FBOs on an airfield is really good because it provides a lot of competition. A lot of airports, smaller G airports especially, only have 1 FBO, and we'll have, going from 4 to 3. We are international airport. We have a full-time customs agent here at the airport that is here during normal business hours and then does overtime hours if we have flights coming in at a later time. And so we have aircraft that are capable of taking off from Centennial Airport and flying direct to Paris, to London, all the way to Pacific Rim, Hong Kong, directly from this airport. So the aircraft of today, the business aircraft of today, have amazing capabilities. Last year, we sold 16.8 million gallons of fuel here at the airport. That's a 37% increase over 2020, which obviously 2020 was a down year, but it's still a 25% increase over what we had in 2019. And then so far this year, year to date, we're 18% above where we were last year at the same time. So business has been extremely good. Ironically, the COVID pandemic has helped the GA industry out. A lot of businesses and high net worth individuals tried out private, either chartering aircraft or purchasing their own private aircraft to do travel instead of going through the airlines. And once you've tried it, it's hard to kind of go back. And so as a result of that, there's been a huge uptick in demand for commercial or for corporate flight and private flight as opposed to going commercial. We have about 850 based aircraft here, and 150 of those are jets. We also have 4 very active flight schools. There's a real shortage of pilots currently, and so our flight schools are very busy currently, and they're at record levels as well. We have a lot of different types of operations that come out of here, anywhere from medevac to military to R&D, the charter, recreational, law enforcement, and also some small cargo. So the only component that we don't do is commercial scheduled service, which they have out of Denver. Like I mentioned, we're an airport authority, which is basically a quasi-governmental entity, and we own and operate the airport. Our board is, we have 8 different.
All right, Mike, one sec. I'm hearing, we're getting some feedback. Okay, I think it's settled.
Okay. So we have a board of airport commissioners that are 8 people. 5 of them are voting members from Arapahoe County, and of those 5 voting members, 3 of them are sitting commissioners. We have Commissioner Nancy Sharp, Commissioner Jeff Baker, and Commissioner Holan are the 3 county commissioners on our board. And then they have 2 appointees that they've appointed from Arapahoe County. Then we also have 3 commissioners airport commissioners from Douglas County. One of them is the sitting Douglas County Commissioner, Abe Layden. And then the other 2 are community leaders that they've designated as part of their group. The reason that the Arapahoe County commissioners are the only ones with voting rights is that started out as Arapahoe County Airport. Arapahoe County put some funds in to start the airport and get us going. And then when we expanded into Douglas County, they gave Douglas County the option of buying in a sense, and contributing some funds to the airport. At the time, Douglas County declined that offer, but they were still allowed a seat at the board. So they do sit at the board. They can make motions, they can make suggestions, but they can't actually vote on anything on the board. We function much like an HOA or a landlord. That's primarily our business model here at the airport. We get revenue either from land leases of the property. Then the second most highest amount of revenue we get from is fuel sales. We get a fuel flowage, but then we also get some of the state taxes charged on fuel sales. We get back here at the airport in the form of grants. We also charge concession fees for the restaurants that are on the airport, and then a little bit of revenue we gain from advertising as well. This is just a kind of a shot we did with our tower here. This kind of gives you a sweeping view of the airport. We developed on the north side of the airport first before transitioning to the south side of the airport, and everything on the south side of the airport has been built in the last 23 years. Here's another shot. This is just an aerial that's looking south. You can see Pikes Peak in the background there. We have our 3 runways. The main runway is 10,000 feet long by 100 feet wide. Just for comparison, all but one of the runways at Denver are 12,000 feet wide, I'm sorry, 12,000 feet long. And so 10,000 feet is a pretty good length for a runway. That's primarily the runway that's utilized by the jet traffic that operates out of here. To the right there is our touch and go runway. That runway is primarily used for training traffic, and so when their pilots are doing their takeoff and landing practice, that's the runway they'll utilize. And then we also have a crosswind runway there, and that's really a good runway, obviously, for when we have strong crosswinds. We'll have our jets actually land on that crosswind runway, but most of the time it's a good runway to kind of get out for the smaller guys and not have to wait behind a bunch of jets to take off on the main runway. So Centennial Airport has a tremendous amount of economic impact. The airport authority itself, if we're fully staffed, only has 28 employees. However, there are a little over 2,000 employees that actually work on the airport for different tenants. Here are some of our tenants in use, and it's a broad range of different companies with different backgrounds, from finance to multimedia, to communications, to food companies, to real estate. So it really is a broad range of companies that utilize and are tenants at Centennial Airport. This is the numbers from a study that the Colorado Division of Transportation, the Aeronautics Division, did, and their 2020 for their 2020 economic impact, and they're based on 2018 numbers. But in 2018, the airport, with all of the jobs and all the benefits on and off the airport, we had $2.1 billion in economic impact here. And so keeping in mind that since then, our fuel sales have gone up significantly even since then. So that number would be even larger today in 2022, but that's where we were in 2018. Some of our kind of more interesting tenants, this is by Aerospace. They're developing an electric aircraft, much like kind of the path that Tesla followed. They want to have electric aircraft that they utilize for training. And although they won't be completely silent, though they will be much quieter than the current training aircraft that are utilized at the airport. They also want to produce something to replace basically a medium-sized turboprop twin engine, like a King Air. And so this is another example of an electric aircraft that they're trying to develop. We also have Sierra Nevada Corp on the airfield. They do a lot of stuff in aviation and aerospace. They retrofit aircraft like this one for military use. They also do a lot of retrofits of aircraft for Customs and Border Patrol, drug interdiction, DEA, surveillance stuff, both foreign and abroad, or foreign and local to the U.S. and border protection. So they do all kinds of things. This is one aircraft that they retrofitted. This is a Korean Air bomber that they actually pulled out of the desert and then retrofitted it, tore it completely down and rebuilt it, and then put up-to-date cameras on it. And this is, if you've ever seen the SpaceX capsules come through the atmosphere back and do the splashdown in the ocean, when they're taking videos of that, and the infrared pictures are all coming from this aircraft. So this aircraft is now contracted with NASA, and they utilize it often. Boom Aerospace is also based out here at Centennial Airport. They are currently testing their prototype, which is in the background here, the XB1. In the foreground is the eventual product that they want to produce. So it's a 50-seat aircraft that has a supersonic capability. And so they're doing the research and development out here. The XB1 Overture, they've been doing, or the XB1 test bed, they've been doing engine tests on it. They'll do their high-speed taxi tests, and then they'll disassemble it and ship it out to Edwards Air Force Base to do the actual supersonic tests in the hopes of producing the larger aircraft down the road. Now, the production of the aircraft and manufacturing would not occur here. I think they have a deal with an airport in North Carolina to do that. But their base of research and development will continue to be at Centennial Airport. And this is
Quick on that one.
Yeah, sure.
Don't mind. And also on the electric one. So I guess what's the range on the electric planes there that they're prototyping?
So they're hoping to have about an hour and a half to 2 hours worth of range for the electric trainer aircraft. And really, if you're doing touch and goes in the pattern, you don't need to go very far. And on your initial cross-country legs, you don't need to go very far. So that's ample time to allow for those activities. But as battery technology improves, not only with the kilowatt hours, but also with the weight of the batteries, that they can reduce the weight of the batteries, those numbers will improve down the road.
Okay. And then can you back up a slide real quick to the two supersonic
Sure.
planes there? So is that top one intended for military use?
No, that's just their test bed. It's basically a 1/3 scale of the larger one in the foreground there. So
okay.
So yeah, they're just testing the concepts, testing the engines and the aerodynamics of it, and then they'll just scale it up effectively to be able to carry 50 passengers.
Yeah. So what was maybe a little bit of a trivia here? Do you know what the passenger capacity was for the Concord?
I believe it was, if I recall, it was like 180. It was just
Okay.
a little under 200.
So this will be a smaller scale, but similar endeavor.
Correct.
Okay.
And actually, a lot of their engineers that are working on this are former engineers that worked on the Concord back in the day. So
Cool.
So pretty interesting concept. They've gotten some pre-orders from United, assuming things move into manufacturing. It's still a real, it's a risky endeavor, this kind of stuff, but we're hoping that they're successful. It'll be a pretty cool aircraft, and it really reduce the travel time on the coast from, LA to Hong Kong significantly by more than half from what normal commercial airliners are capable of.
Yeah, For sure. All right, thank you.
Sure. So some recent developmental achievements here at the airport. Wings built the Blue Sky Gallery. They obviously have their main museum on the Lowry campus, but then this is kind of a separate museum that's more of a flying museum. So the aircraft that they have on display here, they actually utilize and fly and give introductory flights to teachers and students that are interested in getting into aviation. This is the first phase of their build out. They also want to have kind of a central lobby area and then a black sky gallery to focus on space activity. And that's being, part of that is being funded by Sierra Nevada Corp because they do a lot of space stuff as well. And then also on the same campus, the Colorado Skies Academy opened up. Unfortunately, they opened up in 2020 during the pandemic. But this is a middle school, charter school under the Cherry Creek School District that focuses on aerospace education. And there's a picture of the building as it sits now. We also built a new admin building for the airport authority itself. We were operating out of an older office facility at the base of the tower that was unique in its architecture because it looks like the wings of a bird from above. But because of that, there are no straight walls or square corners in the whole building. So it was a bit of a challenge to operate as our administration for the airport out of. So we actually opened this and moved into this building in November of 2020. Sort of moved in. Obviously, we were kind of recovering from the pandemic where a lot of us were working remotely, but we officially opened the building in November 2020. Here's some of the construction of the process of building the building itself. And then here's the building that as it sits now. So it's a really great space for us. The second floor is all used for admin space, and the first floor has meeting space. So if you're an airport tenant on the airport or a company that's based on the airport, that you get to utilize that meeting space for free. And then we also allow outside organizations to reserve space, meeting space there for a small fee. So kind of next, we have a lot of construction going on now. We currently have 6 different hangar projects that are underway currently. In the foreground there with the red steel, that's an expansion to the Modern Aviation campus. Modern Aviation is one of those 3 FBOs that we have here at the airport. And so they're adding two large hangars, one 26,000 square foot hangar and one 23,000 square foot hangar. And then they'll also have a new lobby area for their passengers to show up on. In the background there with the gray steel, that's an expansion. That's the first floors and doors hangar is just to the left of it. And the new floors and doors hangar is the one that's under construction. That's about a 26,000 square foot hangar with about 40,000 square feet of office space in that 3-story structure to the right. And then on top of that, they'll have a patio, rooftop patio to be able to see the runways from. So those are just 3 of the 6 hangars we currently have under construction. This is another one. This is VF Corporation. They recently moved their headquarters to Denver, and they put their flight department at Centennial Airport. VF Corporation is the parent company to North Face, JanSport, Van Shoes, Wrangler Jeans. So a lot of different outlets, and they're a huge Fortune 500 company. This property here, all the way from on the lower left-hand corner, you can see the concrete of one of our taxi lanes there, all the way out to where you can see those planes parked, is going to be our new development called Sky Harbor. And they'll have 4 different rows of 18 hangars. And so that's almost 200,000 square feet of additional hangar space that's going to be built out in 2 different phases over the next 2 to 3 years. And so there's a view of their Sky Harbor development. So there's a huge demand, like I said, for not only aircraft and be able to fly either fractionally or through charter, but also hangar space to store those aircraft. And so all of these hangars are geared towards jet aircraft as opposed to prop aircraft. Of course, with all this traffic and activity out here, there's a significant economic impact out, and we always try to balance the needs of the airport with the needs of the community. And this kind of gets into, talking a lot about development around the airport, whether it's compatible or non-compatible. Typically, obviously residential development is incompatible with an airport environment. And so especially when we're considering development in our approach zones or in what we call our restricted development areas underneath the pattern traffic, we want to prevent as many residential developments as we can. Outside of that, it's a little bit more of a gray area. I know that Aurora is on the periphery of what we call our airport influence area. So Aurora doesn't have any property within any of our approaches or our restricted development areas. But one of the things we've been working on is going out to the different jurisdictions and trying to get everybody on the same page. And in order to do that, our first step is to have everyone adopt our latest set of noise contours. So we did an update to our Part 150 study. We came out with a new set of contours, and so that partially dictates our how we view development around the airport, where that development is within those contours. Now, those contours are made up of what's called DNLs, so day-night level of noise. And basically, it's a logarithmic average over a course of an entire year with a 10 decibel penalty for nighttime operations between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. So it just gives you a kind of an average amount of noise that a home buyer would experience if they were within those contours. Now, the FAA uses 65 DNL as their bright line, and so anything within 65 DNL is definitely non-compatible with the airport environment, and they ask that there not be any residential within those areas. Outside of the 65 DNL, it's a little bit more of a gray area. Sometimes we'll allow some residential, but we'll ask them to do additional window treatments or additional insulation to help reduce the impact of the noise when you're inside the house. We also have several years ago in 2008, we completed a Part 150 study. And out of that, we had 12 different recommendations. And this is kind of a list of those recommendations. All the ones that are in gold have been implemented here. Some of them at the time, like the ban of Stage 1 and Stage 2 aircraft, those are louder jet aircraft. The FAA didn't allow it at the time, but in 2015, all those were phased out anyway. And so everything in the gold has been accomplished. Some of the two, number 4 and number 6, we haven't been able to implement because it affects how the airspace is managed by the tower, and they're concerned about interactions with other air traffic that's going into and out of Denver and into and out of Buckley. But we've been able to do quite a bit, so we're pretty pleased with this progress. We do plan on doing a new Part 150 study next year. We were hoping to get a grant for that, so we'll have updated recommendations that'll come out of that, as well as updated noise contours. So we'll want to definitely work with the city to, first of all, adopt our current contours, but then once that Part 150 study is concluded, we'll want to work with the city to update the latest set or incorporate the latest set of our contours into their land use guidelines.
Right. Mike, can we actually go back to that last slide? Not the CAD one, but keep going. With the bullets.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. There's a lot of jargon on here, so I'm going to ask you to decode some of this for us. So the 350 and 10-degree headings there, could you kind of explain what direction that would be relative to the airport?
Sure. And maybe I'll just kind of go down really quickly on all of these, and so I can hit them all. But
Sure.
Band 1 and Stage 1 and Stage 2 aircraft I covered. Implement 010 departure heading for business jets at night. So all our runways are laid out on a compass heading, and so 350 is directly north, and 010 is just slightly right of north. And so the intent of that at Centennial was that at night to have aircraft take off, and instead of flying north and then to the west over the neighborhoods, they would fly north and slightly to the left, which puts them over Cherry Creek State Park. And so that wasn't allowed during daytime, but they did allow us to test that at night, and it's still being tested at night. It's a voluntary thing that the aircraft operator can ask for. And then the number 4 that wasn't allowed was kind of very similar, except you fan it out between the 350 heading and the 010 heading. So you're not on one path the whole time. But the effect of that was, or the intent of that was, tried to get more of the traffic over Cherry Creek State Park before making that westerly turn. Eliminate preferential runway use procedure. That is a procedure that was in place before we had a lot of development. We would ask
Mike, can you hear me? Okay, sorry, we lost you for a second there. I think you had a little bit of a bandwidth issue. So could you repeat that last part? Sorry.
Sure. So eliminate the preferential runway use procedure. That was a procedure we had in place when we didn't have as much development on the south side of the airport. And we asked aircraft when able, when the winds were low and during nighttime hours, to take off to the south and arrive from the south. Now that's shifting significantly. We're getting a lot of development on the south side, so it made sense to just eliminate that altogether. Number 6, the 170 degree departure. That is the south departure. So that was, once again, the intent of that was to have them fly south a little bit further before making a right-hand turn and heading over the mountains. And so instead of going over Lone Tree and Highlands Ranch, they would go a little bit further and go over the bluffs between Lone Tree and Castle Pines North, effectively. So,
Okay.
but that was turned down partially because a lot of times, even if we're in south flow or south departure, sometimes you have opposing traffic that are practicing on our instrument runway that are working opposite to that. And so it was a safety concern, and so they didn't allow that to move forward. Amend community plans and zoning ordinances. That's kind of what I was talking about as far as.
Can I interrupt again? Sorry. So what is 4DME? What exactly does that mean?
Yes. So DME is a piece of equipment on an aircraft that measures the distance. So 4DME is, I mean, effectively that's 4 nautical miles. Okay. From the end of the threshold of the runway. Or in this case, once they reach 8,000 feet MSL, which is above sea level.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. We use all kinds of jargon in aviation, so I appreciate you pointing that out. So yeah, so the community plans and zoning ordinances, that's what I'm talking about as far as, amending those, adding updated noise contours whenever those come out from the airport and the FAA. And then also, in our perfect world, we would have everybody on a level playing field. So if it's an approach zone, all the cities would treat it the same. Same thing with the restricted development area. Everything would be treated the same, regardless of the jurisdiction. And that's one of our challenges, is that each jurisdiction has a different set of land use and zoning rules. So sure. I think the first step of that is to get those contours approved by everybody and at least get everybody on the same page as far as what the average noise levels are relative to where the runways are. Update and establish noise abatement liaison office. So we actually opened a noise office. I was the first noise officer at Centennial at the time and opened that office here. And so we do have a full-time employee that's dedicated solely to noise and environmental issues here. Install a noise monitor system. We have a permanent noise monitor system with 12 different monitors around the airport. We tried to get half of them in Arapahoe County and half of them in Douglas County. We wanted to get one off the end of each of our runways. And then we also wanted to get one in each of our surrounding jurisdictions. So, and in addition to those 12 permanent monitors, we also have 2 portable monitors that we can move around and place in people's yards if they like to have us take a closer look. When we get noise complaints from the community, it's really subjective and it's their perception of the noise. But if we can actually measure the noise, put a noise monitor in their backyard, we can actually figure out how much is the noise is attributed to the aircraft versus attributed to community noise in that location. Develop and implement.
I was just going to mention for our Aurora folks that we worked very hard back when this was first came out in 2008 to get one in Sagebrush Park. So that's the one in Aurora. So just for your information, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Karen. I should have mentioned that. So let's see. We also, the Fly Quiet program. So that's something we've worked with a noise roundtable on closely, and those are voluntary only. The FAA wouldn't allow us to mandate that the aircraft fly in certain locations because that's their jurisdiction, is the control of the airspace and control of those aircraft. But we do have voluntary noise abatement program we produce posters and pamphlets and brochures that we've handed out. All of our flight schools utilize that in their pilot training. So as we train new pilots, they learn what our voluntary noise abatement policies are, and try to follow them whenever reasonable and whenever it doesn't affect safety of the operation. Operations review and Part 150 updates. So periodically we do update of our noise contours, which we've done once since we've done our full Part 150 study. And then next year, like I said, we'd like to do an update to our full Part 150 study. And then as a result of that, we'll come out of that with more land use recommendations and new noise contours. And then the last one there is establishing a roundtable committee. So our roundtable has been in place a little over 10 years now. So, and they've been really, really helpful for the airport and the community. We have representation from all the different jurisdictions on that roundtable, and so we work closely with them to look for solutions to some of our noise issues here at the airport. And with that, I'll kind of move on. Here's just a picture of one of our portable noise monitors. We had it set that's actually on airport property. We were just setting it up to test it. And this is just an example of kind of what we can get out of the system. So it's really a system that takes a bunch of data streams. So you have one data stream from the radar tracks of the aircraft itself. You have another data stream of the actual noise of the monitors. In this picture, you can see there's kind of a red dome there. So you can actually set up zones around specific houses or specific locations and then change the radius so it can be a half mile or a mile. And then you can figure out exactly how many aircraft pass through those zones. And so we utilize that quite a bit when we're doing individual portable noise monitor tests at different households. We'll set it out there for a week. We'll get a week's worth of data and be able to figure out how loud each of those aircraft events were versus how loud the ambient noise is in the neighborhood to begin with, and then the community noise that contributes to that. This is just a little bit kind of into the weeds as far as how those noise contours are modeled. And this is just kind of basically a heat map. So the more flight tracks you have, the darker the line is. And so you can see north and south of the main runway. These are the jet tracks. So this is primarily where the jet traffic takes off. And you can see on the right one there, how it kind of flares off to the west. So naturally, as they take off, they'll direct them a little bit to the west to avoid Buckley Airspace and Denver's approach and departure traffic. And then that's when they proceed to climb out. So in our ideal world, that would actually flare a little bit to the right, get it over the park, and then go to the west once they've gained more altitude. This is the non-jet density plot. So you can see on the far right there, that's actually the pattern traffic for our training traffic. And they also, they utilized markers on the ground. So you'll see a lot of density along Parker Road, and then also coming down Arapahoe Road. So they use those visual roadways on the ground to help navigate to the airport. And so you take all of those flight tracks over the course of a year, and you come up with what's called noise contours. And this is a picture of our 2016 baseline contours. And it was pretty interesting with the phase out of stage 1 and stage 2 aircraft in 2015. Our noise contours actually contracted pretty significantly on the north and south axis. They did expand a little bit and widen out a little bit because the modeling system was better at modeling some of the prop traffic and touch and go traffic. And so they got a little bit fatter, but it got a little bit shorter on the north-south axis. And then our forecast for 2021, they anticipated our traffic would continue to increase slightly between those 2 years. And they forecasted the contours, and it's really hard to tell between the two slides here, but the contours in 2021 did expand out a little bit. So that's one of the downsides to relying solely on the contours, is that each day those contours fluctuate in and out, and depending on the amount of traffic and depending on the traffic mix. And so it's just one tool we use for kind of assessing whether a development is compatible or incompatible with the airport environment. So, and we also, think it's really important to give back to the community. Centennial Airport has a foundation that we have, the Centennial Airport Foundation, and we give to over 20 different charities throughout the year, anywhere from aerospace education to veterans and law enforcement causes, health and well-being, civic, cultural, and business and economic development. And so it's really a broad range. And a few examples of that, Morgan Adams is actually, they base their annual event, a charity event at the Centennial Airport every year. It's our biggest charitable event. They regularly raise about $800,000 a year from this event. They have really cool classic and high-end cars that they display, as well as aircraft. And that's a charity that helps out with pediatric cancer. Then there's Challenge Air for Kids and Friends. These are just special needs kids. We bring them out to the airport and give them free rides in aircraft to kind of, so they can experience flight and experience aviation in a small aircraft. Make-A-Wish, this is something that one of our charter companies does. Every once in a while they'll repaint one of their aircraft, and they'll paint it in the Make-A-Wish colors and give kids flights in a business jet aircraft. And so that's a really cool event when we have those every few years. And with that, that's kind of a wrap up. I know that Karen was wanting me to kind of present a little bit about the airport and talk for consideration. And so we appreciate that consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the airport or about the noise contours or anything else that I presented on today.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that presentation, Mike. There's really interesting stuff in there. I do have one more question before I hand it off to my colleagues, and that is, you, I think, identified $2.1 billion of economic activity, right? How much of that comes back to the city of Aurora? How many folks, if you know, are employed, who are employed at the airport, whether directly or through some of the tenants that you have, actually reside in the city of Aurora? And how much of that general economic activity directly benefits the city as well?
Yeah, unfortunately, the study didn't go that far into detail as far as where all those people reside. I mean, just speaking out of my experience, I would say, at least for the airport staff, I'd say maybe a quarter of our staff reside in Aurora, and then the rest are distributed. I know there are several of us in Parker, several of us in Centennial, a few of us in Greenwood Village. So yeah, I'd say maybe, if I had to guess, a quarter, probably about a quarter of the economic impact from the airport benefits Aurora directly. And then Aurora, of course, also benefits, from Buckley and even more so from Denver. They're also huge economic generators along with Centennial Airport.
Very true. All right, thank you. Councilmember Coombs?
I do not have anything further.
All righty, Councilor Murillo?
Councilmember Marcano, and thank you, Mike. It was a really informative presentation. I don't have anything in addition. I really do appreciate kind of the overview and just having the opportunity to stay abreast of all things Centennial Airport, and I'm really glad that you came to present and share more.
Great, thank you. I will say, I'll throw this out here now. One of the things that we're trying to do is do a little bit more outreach to our surrounding communities, and so I'm trying to coordinate currently with the City of Centennial and some of their planning staff and some of their committees and the City Council and Mayor to come out to Centennial and take a tour. So if there's an interest in doing that, we would welcome bringing anybody from Aurora that's interested out to the airport and giving you a tour of the actual airport itself.
Oh, that sounds great. I'd be very interested. So definitely count me in. And if you can just copy the whole of our council on that invitation, I'm sure you'd get a lot of takers. So
yeah, I mean, I can coordinate probably through Karen to set something up. We'd be happy to do that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would be happy to facilitate. And I did want to just mention that we do get some noise complaints from Kings Point for the training traffic. And the noise office has been a great partner in helping us address those concerns. And that Mike mentioned about FAA contours and what they regulate. We regulate much more protectively and do not allow residential uses in the 60 DNL contour and above, and require noise attenuation in residential construction in the 55 DNL and up. And then I just wanted you all to know that we are taking those updated contours to PED on July 13th. So they do not have to have full council review because the contours do not affect City of Aurora property. So the one good thing about transitioning to these new ones is that they are getting quieter. So that was all I had. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's great news.
Yep.
All right. Well, with no further questions, thank you again, Mike, for the presentation. I really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to those invites.
All right. Yeah, I'll work with Karen to see if we can set up a date that works for everybody. And even if we have to split it up to more than one date, we're happy to do that.
All right, great. Well, thanks again.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next up on the agenda, we've got 4B, International Making Cities Livable Conference Planning Concepts. All right. Who put that on the agenda? No. All right. So I think that's me and Councilmember Murillo. So Councilmember Murillo, do you want to get us started?
Yes, and give me one moment see if I can figure out how to get on camera. Let's see. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to present. I know I'm very excited to talk a little bit more about the conference. Councilmember Marcano and I have both we co-presented at a public meeting. It was a very robust presentation, I think about an hour and a half and some change. So we promise we won't take anywhere near that amount of time meeting, but wanted to follow up with this committee to really just share kind of the lessons learned and kind of what we're hoping to maybe explore in the city of Aurora, and really just share the vision that we were so inspired by. We also attended the conference, including Councilmember Coombs last year when it was in Carmel, Indiana, and we learned a lot of really awesome kind of just planning examples and concepts. The way that they choose their host cities is very much kind of an exemplary city around the world to really bring policymakers, the planners, the architects, just researchers, academics into the same space to really answer the question, how do we make cities livable? There was kind of a few main themes of the conference. One was around living and growing and all things cities in the margins of major cities. So we actually were in a suburb next to Paris of about 30,000 people. And though Aurora is a little bit bigger, kind of the same concept around being next to a major metropolitan city, for us, that being Denver, and how do we kind of interact and engage and develop using the resources that we have, and using kind of different best practices. Another concept that was just the focal point of the conference was around the idea of a 15-minute city. So the idea being that within a 15-minute walk, residents should have access to all the things that they might need, right? And so obviously that is germane to this policy committee meeting with, when we talk about transit and transportation, but recognizing that also transcends other, issue areas, especially as it relates to planning and economic development as well. I'm sure you all are very aware of lots of intersections in the work that you all do in your departments with other departments as well. So that's kind of the stage. Juan or Councilmember Marcano, did you want to kick us off with sharing some of the slides from the PowerPoint that you might be pertinent to kind of ground us in that 15-minute city concept? And you guys have the full presentation in the backup. Happy to elaborate on any one particular slide. So I almost feel like we're presenting to staff right now.
Yeah.
So if you all have any questions, it's kind of a role reversal. Please feel free to ask. We're happy to elaborate. But this is the kind of the concept, and Juan loves his maps, so he was able to kind of help us visualize, which I think is super helpful. Kind of some major areas, and then what a kind of 15-minute radius would look like. And there's just so many like cross applicable lessons learned, but that's really the vision. And we were so inspired, especially with, the thought of how big Aurora is and just the amenities they had access to. You would never, ever guess that the population was only 30,000 people. They just had so many like beautiful, beautifully designed modern buildings, and they had a mixture of income levels, of housing. It was also mixed use, which I know is a big kind of trend and theme, especially as we consider redevelopment of older areas. And for example, this is wards, both of our wards, the roughly the same. Was it, how many square miles, Juan?
It's 1.3 square miles.
Oh, yeah. So that's the land mass, 30,000 population. So, one little chunk or corner of Ward 1, has the potential to look and be developed in a sustainable way where there's, just everything you need in 15 minutes. I think that like kind of sums it all up. So, Juan, do you want to jump in here with any additional comments?
Yeah, for sure. So, sorry, I'm trying to just skip through the parts that are relevant to TAPS because, we picked up a lot from the conference, and I think really to encapsulate everything, we'd need to have like a joint session of TAPS and PED staff, since the two concepts really do run very, very much together. But I wanted to kind of start with this slide here, which is the goal, I think, of where we'd like to see our planning and development and infrastructure philosophy pivot towards. And what you see here is a map of the core of Aurora. And these circles I placed basically at major junctions where there's commercial property available. That can either be redeveloped, or in the case of the point, which you see down in blue in Ward 4, is currently being redeveloped. So the interior circle is the 5-minute walk, which is, obviously the ideal scenario, right? That's extreme convenience for pedestrians and folks who rely on mobility aids. And then the deeper or the thicker circle is a 15-minute walk. And what I noticed when I was trying to just spitball locations here is that this is actually, I think, something that we could replicate in Aurora with some concentrated effort and what I am describing as assertive city planning. So as opposed to letting the private sector kind of, do what they want to do, in both Plessy and in Carmel, in Indiana, the public sector had a more direct role in kind of steering the direction of the development. They did that through a combination of either public-private partnerships, land banking, so that they then got to have a say over what got developed on that land, or using urban renewal authorities. In the case of the United States, up in Carmel, they have the Carmel Redevelopment Corporation, I think is what they call it. And in Plessy, they have a different, form of government, but it was effectively a city, I wanted to say state, but a city-directed redevelopment plan that was bid out basically to local competing urban planners and architecture firms. So what they did was, go from having a fairly sprawled, car-dependent suburb in the case of Carmel, or in the case of Plessy here. This would be considered sprawled by European standards. So let me just pop this one up. There we go, from current slide. This is what it used to look like. So you can see there's a lot of just vacant green space. Their primary corridor was more like a Chambers Road, like our 6-lane Stroads. And as they began to redevelop their city, this part was already redeveloped in 2003. They started this process, I want to say, in the mid-90s. They used phased construction basically to build new housing and commercial spaces along what used to just be a tree-lined Stroad, pretty much. And did it in phases so that they would basically redevelop a section, move people in, demo the other one, then redevelop that one, move people in, etc. So for TAPS specifically, what I'd like to see us focus on would be the actual street, since that is something that we have direct, I would say is very, very relevant to the topics we cover in this committee. And really, I think part of the success of this new urbanist design, whether it's done in France or in Carmel or here in Aurora, is going to be the design of the street and the use of that space. So you can see this used to be their Chambers Road, basically. It was a Stroad, didn't have really any pedestrian, amenities in the center, and this whole thing was very car dependent. So they took a 6-lane Stroad and turned it into a 2-lane actual like avenue or boulevard with pedestrian amenities down the center and off-street parking. And of course, part of what makes this a huge success is the fact that they don't have BRT here, but the buses come so rapidly that it may as well be. There are buses, I think, every like 4 to 7 minutes up and down this corridor, and multiple lines as well. So it really reduced that, single or just a single occupancy vehicle or just vehicle dependency, private vehicle dependency overall. So the design of the street is not just a benefit here for their pedestrians and folks with disabilities. You can see they have very wide sidewalks now that they reclaimed from drivable surface, but it's also a tremendous economic benefit because you slow people down, even if they're driving. I think the speed limit on the stretch was 20 kilometers an hour, so about 15 miles an hour, give or take. You're able to still move through here pretty easily operating a vehicle, but it actually gives more exposure to the businesses and other amenities on the ground floor and makes them much more accessible by foot, bike, wheelchair, however it is folks get around. So that's what I mean by the street, the use of the street. And that, of course, here we go. I wanted to pull up.
And Juan, if you
this.
don't mind
Go ahead,
me
Crystal.
interjecting,
Yeah.
so that was a picture from the suburb that we were in. There, right, what you don't see is on the other side is a public park.
Yeah.
Just on the other side of the right hand of the street, and then just before you can't see the intersection right in front of it, but that's in front of their like performing arts center. They have like a movie theater, they have like a open market space, as well as just like there we go, that's like right before that. So and it just, the design of it, I think, is just very multimodal friendly. And then I don't think we have a picture of it here, but in Paris proper, there were similar concepts, I think, executed a little bit differently for, to match kind of the density. Mind you, they have like roundabouts are a lot more common, and, just other kind of cultural things. But I would say, even in like the city proper, the larger, a metropolitan area, they had similar roadway designs. So instead of potentially just one lane like it is in this smaller town of traffic. Each side might have had two, but in the middle, they also had like a very wide walkway, not just like a single person. It was like a true like walkway. They had like benches. It was like a fully, like, imagine that just stretched out over like a Havana, right? Like to scale it a little bit more, it would need to be wider kind of thing. But they had, the pedestrian walkways. They had like public composting just on the side there. Just like so many great benefits. And we even like walked around and like ran into like the restaurants that were, let's say just right on the ground floor of that, like where you see in the picture of just like the building there, where they had maybe narrower sidewalks, or they had some capacity to like spill out of their actual restaurant to have like just little seating and dining area immediately next to their restaurant in that kind of middle area when it wasn't in, when it wasn't in like peak hours and use. They spilled into their restaurant space was allowed to set up in that like kind of public middle way, which, from an economic development standpoint, I think would be super interesting to explore as well. I know it's a bit, out of the scope of, specifically of like our conversation today, but I guess I wanted to like that same concept definitely was something I observed kind of in both of those settings. So I think it would be, I guess I just think it's obviously it's a good idea where we think it's a good idea, and just like the scalability definitely is there. And I think I think that's not one size fits all will fit in Aurora. I think there are some. Havana looks very different than Colfax versus Montview in terms of assets and how you might grow and develop too.
Yeah. So I wanted to pull this up from Carmel. This was actually from last year's conference, because I think it's actually a really great section of this kind of mixed use human scale design that we're discussing. So you can see here, this is actually from, oops, I did not mean to click there, sorry. This is from the Monon Trail in Carmel. So that's a regional attraction. That's a massive bike path down the center. You can see that, y'all can see my mouse moving around, right? Okay, good. Yeah, you can see that here in red. And then they have a giant 13-foot wide pedestrian easement, and then these other little buffer areas and stuff. So you can apply this to a Havana, maybe even in the future a Montview, by maybe paring down some of this programmable space in the center, but still creating protected infrastructure for bicyclists, adding for, making for 2 lanes of traffic, or maybe even a bus rapid transit lane in 2 drive lanes as opposed to off-street parking. Obviously this would need to be in harmony with the context of the area. We can't literally just copy paste, street sections, but these are the kinds of improvements that I think we both really came back with a much stronger appreciation for. Although I would say that here on the Monon Trail, something that I'd like to see different for us would be a larger setback here, so that there's more space that can be that can transition use during the course of the day, because that's one of the really interesting, I guess maybe it's a cultural difference or maybe just a result of the built environment. But they have very, very deep sidewalks, even deeper than these. And during the mornings, during commuting time, these are often full of folks riding their bikes, people just walking, families escorting their kids to school, etc. And then after that, like morning rush hour, the restaurants in the area, especially the breakfast eateries and the bakeries, would actually expand out into that space. So traffic dies down, the commercial spaces basically increase outside. Then there's a transition right before basically the evening rush hour where folks condense, and you start seeing that opposite use again, where folks are using the sidewalk more as a thoroughfare. And then after that heavier period of traffic, then the diners and or not diners, but the more full service restaurants and bars and things like that open up and then start taking up different parts of the sidewalk. So this is very much in keeping with the concept of a 15-minute city, which is basically every square foot of your city in the public spaces has multiple purposes. So it's not just, this will always only ever be a sidewalk and that's it. It is used as a sidewalk when it needs to be. Then it can be used as an expansion of commercial or restaurant or retail space as needed. And that kind of multi-use space brings in more foot traffic, obviously, facilitates that traffic, and it creates a more kind of dynamic urban environment. Something that really we can't facilitate when our default in Aurora seems to just be like, stroads, basically. That ties into, again, some stuff that we're currently working through on the PED side with our UDO review. We're hoping to reduce the code required setbacks so that we can get rid of enormous parking lots, which from my perspective are wasted space. Find ways where we can incentivize stacked parking, since it's my understanding subterranean parking is a little out of most people's price ranges anymore. But just basically finding better ways to utilize, land and benefit more from our existing infrastructure. This is one of the other examples that I came out with from last year, where, this used to just be a basically vacant farm area and then a dead commercial center, and they turned it into this really nice mixed use, section of the city. That's growing out from there. Like basically these two images that you see here are a very small representation of Carmel currently. When you get away from the city center, it's very much more like Aurora, but it shows that this kind of development is doable. You can work this into an existing sprawled suburb. And then in the case of Plessy, eventually this becomes, over what they've been doing that over there for like almost 30 years now. It becomes basically the character and the default kind of land use approach and design approach for the city. So there was another.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Oh.
While I look
Oh,
through
I
the-
was, well, I was just gonna say, I recognize that this is likely not the first time you've ever heard of some of these concepts. So, I think we're sharing kind of the vision, the excitement, the potential, and wanting to hopefully like have a conversation, just on a time check, it's 2:09, and get a sense of like, you guys' comfortability, familiarity with these concepts, where some of these concepts already exist in our existing planning, get a sense of ways we might explore, implementation down the line. Obviously, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made with lots of decision makers if we ever were to adopt something like this. So, I guess we're just really excited to think through and see if there's potential for and capacity and appetite for imagining kind of, especially the roadway infrastructure in terms of the scope of this committee, and then in other committees around how that might impact just our ability to do things better and implement these best practices, and how we might take what we learned and apply here. If we did some of this stuff, like Aurora would be positioned to like host the next International Making Cities Livable conference in several years. And then I guess I think the other impetus is just the conversations around roadway maintenance. It seems really, I don't know, it just seems strategic and a bit of an oversight if we didn't like push the question around, if we're repaving roads, putting in plain terms, it almost begs the question, like, is that where our money is best spent? I'm not saying we don't need to, make sure that where our roads are well maintained and kept, 100% agree. But if we're being, I guess, strategic and long-term, we know that that's not the end all be all, and that there is a desire for folks, from folks and from community to be multimodal and to be, use taxpayer dollars efficiently and effectively. And, just felt like the right time to kind of bring that up, understanding that there's kind of that concurrent maintenance and happening, and is there any potential for future visioning and implementation of some of these concepts?
Yeah.
So if
anybody, do you guys mind if I jump in just a
No,
little
please go
bit,
ahead.
Cindy? So this is great information. I would like to say, and planning will be much more eloquent about this than I am, but we have a really good basis within the Aurora places. I know in one of the graphics you said, what's the next place in Aurora that we could look at something like the Point? And I really think we would find that within Aurora places because it does such a good job of looking at the different areas of the city. I would also like to tell you that we work within a complete streets framework. So we are really looking at how do we handle all the different multimodal aspects and and making the streetscape look nice as well. And then the last thing that I will tell you is that we are putting in for a Dr. Cog tip grant to do a citywide multimodal transportation study. Mac and I and planning and public works staff members have been talking about this a lot. We want it to be really visionary because we don't have a citywide multimodal transportation study. And we want to look at the city as a whole, but then also the different areas and how they need treatments to become more walkable, better accessible. So not only will we be creating this vision for the city, we actually, as part of that study, want to pull out some key projects that we can get funding and implement to incorporate even some of these ideas you all are talking about. So I'll stop there and answer questions or see if anybody else wants to add anything.
Yeah. I'll just say that, that's very exciting. I just want us to, stress that it's important to update our infrastructure to make it more accessible and more inviting to folks. But I think part of where we really struggle, and I think this is true of not just Aurora, but in a lot of, contemporary suburbs in North America, is that even if you improve the infrastructure, it goes unused and people opt for their cars because there's not anything nearby that they can get to on that infrastructure, right? Like we need to fill in gaps in Ward 4. I have constituents who have written me repeatedly who are, dependent on wheelchairs or walkers or who ride the bus and they don't have a, bus stop that isn't just a grassy knoll. Y'all know the one I'm talking about on Yale. And, and even then, like they'll be able to get to their bus, but there aren't any other places close by. So part of what I'm hoping we're making clear is that I think we don't just need to revise and update our infrastructure, but also our land use generally, because the separated use that we have where people live over here, they work way the heck over here, and then somewhere in the middle is where their commercial areas are, some amenities are. That's antiquated, and it's contributing to what we're showing here on this slide, where we have that, giant spike in our growth whenever we add, new residential developments, and we always build out onto the fringes. We don't focus on infill, and we don't think about amenities, right? As I'm speaking to y'all, Murphy Creek is still a food desert. And that's a 15-year-old, metro district at this point, because we didn't, we let the private sector just do what they wanted to do. So I think we actually need to be more assertive from our perspective to ensure our residents are not just getting residences, which are very important, but also the services that they need so that we can cut down on the, unnecessary roadway network expansion, at least to the extent that we've been experiencing it here. Because we just approved, 35 million, about 53, I think, with interest is the estimate. I don't want us to be back in the same place with whoever's on council 20 years from now, So, yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now, but I just wanted to add that onto that last part. Matt, go ahead.
Councilmember Marcano, appreciate that. Appreciate the presentation, Councilmember Murillo, on these. What we're finding out as we're addressing the greenhouse gas rule for the state, and in particular our Metroplex and in the Dr. Cog plan and whatnot, is that the association of transportation and land use is probably more significant in terms of reducing trip lengths by having those education, work, restaurant, shopping, services, those in a closer orientation to one another and much more integrated efficiently. Then, for instance, we were in a transit Reimagine RTD technical working group yesterday, and the policy group met this morning. Councilmember Lawson serves on that. Because right now and estimated into the future, transit is still represents a relatively small percentage of total trips, and in particular vehicle trips, or overwhelmingly in the majority at this point. That unless we have a rapid change in the energy sources, changing from gas and diesel to electric to address greenhouse gas, there's a lot of thinking now being discussed and being revealed in the modeling of these scenarios for the greenhouse gas rule in 2025, 2030, 2040, and 2050. We have actual emission reduction requirements in million metric tons of carbon dioxide, that having land use integrated and those mixed of uses and offerings offers a lot of leverage and attainment towards those greenhouse goals. Now, we all know that it's difficult. It requires the right developers. It requires what I would call patience, patient money, patient investment when you have these. And now we find ourselves in an environment with such a shortage on the residential side that residential development is relatively risk-free now, and it's receiving a lot of participation from the private market side, so to speak. So, but available for questions. But appreciate the presentation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, and I know we jumped around a bit between two different years here because I was just trying to keep it to we were both trying to keep it to the TAPS relevant stuff, at least as much as possible, because I find it very difficult to separate that because this whole vision, this whole idea runs together with a lot of stuff that we'd cover at PED. But I did want to also bring this up as well. Y'all have heard me talk about intersections quite a bit. And this is a slide that I hadn't shown y'all yet, I think, from last year's presentation. But this was from one of the highways, the Keystone Parkway in Carmel. And at this point, the Keystone Parkway is the same width as I-225. And I just wanted to show here the difference in land use between what they were proposing to do there with their traditional kind of tight diamond interchange and what they ended up doing with their roundabout. And I'm just wondering, I brought this up when the new interchange on E470 was discussed over, I think it's on Quincy, right? That it's an interesting design, and I understand it's safer than a traditional one. But I drove through it yesterday to go down to the state of the county at the fairgrounds, and I just can't help but wonder, why didn't we instead do something like this? Because it's, we have all that land out there. E470 is 2 lanes at that area. And that intersection, maybe it works, but it's a huge footprint compared to this teardrop style intersection. And I know that we're going to continue to see a lot of growth on the east side of Aurora. There are going to be more intersections with E470 that need to be updated or even created. And I'm just hopeful that, Carly, I'm kind of looking at you for this one, that we can really explore this model that they're using very successfully in Indiana now. Just a little bit of background on this. The state, when the city of Carmel actually proposed for the state to do this, they refused. They wanted to do this, tight diamond. So basically the city pushed back and the state said, well, if you want that so bad, we'll dedicate the highway to you and we'll even give you some funding to maintain it. But we're not going to deal with that because we think it's not going to work and that's going to be your problem to deal with. Well, they've now done this pretty much at every single intersection of a highway intersection around the city limits of Carmel. And the state of Indiana is now utilizing this as a, highly preferred option where they're building new intersections or even reworking intersections as it worked out so well over there. So I understand that I-225 might actually be a little wider than the Keystone Parkway in some areas, but this is a really innovative design that's saved them a tremendous amount of not just upfront costs, because it takes up less land than the tight diamond. You can see how much they would have had to eminent domain here. That's what all this red is on the left-hand side to build that intersection versus what they ended up having to do to get the teardrop. And this would have been a complete demolition of this church here. Instead, they just had to snag a corner of the parking lot for their teardrop intersection. So I can't help but wonder what other opportunities we have to maybe emulate this kind of design within Aurora as we continue to grow. So I just wanted to throw that one out there. I didn't want y'all to think that we were going to get away from a new urbanism discussion without me advocating for roundabouts again. So.
And just to like focus us just a little bit, because I think that I mean I think in terms of, you know, again, just doing a time check, we have about 8 minutes.
Yep.
I think we've thrown a lot at y'all. And I think the comments made about kind of these larger visions and planning, I think dovetails so nicely with us being able to continue this conversation about other types of best practices in different areas. So I think that I'm glad we had an opportunity to share that, but just to kind of refocus us on the conversation today, you know, I think I was hoping to walk away with a sense of kind of where we're at in terms of how we plan, kind of, you know, get questions that you all have. Love to follow up, obviously, if there are additional questions too, but also, you know, kind of all of those things sound so like far in the future, right? And it will take years, right, for that to happen. And I think that's normal, natural, it makes sense. But I guess I'm wondering what happens between now, or what could happen between now and then, right? Like that kind of gray area. And I think again, back to kind of the impetus of this conversation right now was just post was it spring workshop conversation at the spring workshop around infrastructure funding, like just kind of these concurrent projects that are already happening, and is there potential for us to, I guess, be a little bit more nimble with the understanding that kind of long term, that's great, and we would love to do that. It needs to happen. I'm excited, but like short term, with these kind of like opportunities that we have, you know, is there a potential for exploring implementation of these types of concepts so that we're not, you know, 10 years or 5 years from now and like we just have a plan, and then after the plan we have to execute the plan, right? Like and believe me, I love a good strategic plan. That is my jam, but I also recognize that there are, you know, that takes time. So yeah, I guess that's my like very pointed question. I'm not sure who that's directed to.
So,
It's kind of what happens until then.
so this is Mindy. I wanted to add, this conversation is right on cue. We are, because of the state efforts to reduce greenhouse gases, there are many initiatives that are asking all jurisdictions in the region, and it has to be a regional solution, not just something unique to us. You know, we met yesterday. There is a directive from the state to work with the Colorado Department of Transportation, the Energy Office, the Department of Local Affairs, Public CDPHE, Department of Natural Resources, to come up with a new land use plan for the region. And it's talking about all these. You cannot separate land use from road design. You can't have a building that doesn't orient towards a street if you want the street to be successful, or if you want the neighborhood to be successful. But we have 50 to 60 years of a development pattern that we've got to rethink. And through these efforts with our partnership with Public Works and this multimodal transportation master plan, we can no longer go after state dollars that doesn't have a multimodal component to it. It will not happen. You won't get the funding. And we have to demonstrate how we're going to reduce greenhouse gases. And all the concepts you brought up today aid in that, in meeting those goals. And there are other jurisdictions that are struggling with the same challenges we are. So if we, we can invite you to be part of this process and also to be part of the multimodal transportation master plan. We do think it's going to change, but it'd be nice if we all come to this together and get consensus about our direction. So we're here for you, and we can share all this information with you as we continue to work together. So.
Great. No, that's really exciting to hear, Mindy, and I would absolutely love to be a part of that. I'm sure Councilor Coombs and Murillo would as well. I do just want to kind of circle back to Councilor Murillo's, I think, point here, though, is like, what can we do in the short term? And the reason I bring this slide back up is because, again, we just approved, a significant amount of money to go back and begin to rework and repair our existing residential and collector roads. And I see a huge opportunity while we are doing that work to improve the road quality and safety for multimodal transportation in our neighborhoods. And one of the things that I would like to see, and I want to know if this was maybe something that y'all are already thinking about with those funds, is adding protected and separated bike infrastructure in residential areas where the streets are wide enough to permit that. I can give you an example where I think that would actually work really well, is right outside of my window on Harvard, next to Blackhawk. It's a very, very wide residential street. I have had people actually fly by me. This happened to me just last week, doing 60 plus miles an hour would be my guess, because the road is wide enough to allow that and there's no obstructions. But if we have, bike lanes on either side of, the residential roads, or at least the main, the more heavily used residential roads, with those reflective white posts, I think those are fairly inexpensive. And we to bolster the painted infrastructure that we have, I think that would really help with traffic calming. It would make it so that folks who are parking off street are just another foot or so, further away from the curb and sidewalk. So it gives those folks a little more breathing room. It protects the bikers, and it would then reduce the total width when there's people using off-street parking on either side of the road, with the goal of basically having that psychological traffic calming effect so that folks aren't flying through our residential roads. So is that something that would be possible? Is that something that y'all have talked about?
So,
Chime in on-
Councilmember
oh, go ahead.
Marcano, understanding all those situations, that actually is more of our traffic calming. The COPs that we're doing for the roadway maintenance are specifically for the roadway maintenance portion. But in the 2023 budget, I think we have asked for another 2.5 to 3 million for traffic calming, so that we can address some of these other issues that that you're bringing up. We are always happy to take in a traffic calming application and look at it that way. But for this specific maintenance funding pot that we have, it does have to be allocated just to the roadway maintenance right now.
Well, is
Can I
there a
chime
way
in,
that we
Cindy,
can
too, on what we do?
both
Sorry
at
to
the same
interrupt.
time, though?
Carly.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so those are great comments, and we actually do something pretty similar to what you're talking about with the overlay program, and we've done it this way for, I don't know, at least 5 years that I'm aware of. But what we do is when Streets develops their overlay program, they as soon as they develop it, they send it over to my group, and we go through and we take a really close look at the cross sections, because you're right, the overlay is a great time that if we want to make any striping changes to do it then, because it's a blank slate, it's completely scraped off, like it's very cost effective to get our striping changes done then. So there's a lot of locations where we've either made, different improvements that we've seen as needed with transitions and things like that, centerline changes. And we also go through our bike master plan and add in bike lanes wherever we can. And we take a pretty close look at the cross sections and try to fit them in and see if we can fit in buffers. So we definitely take a close look at all of the paint, because that's really the main thing that we have the ability to capitalize on with the overlay. I think the vertical elements that you discussed are what is a little harder to include with the overlay, because that's a different contractor. It'd be done differently. You're not getting the same cost savings because they're not already out there doing similar work. So like Cindy said, like if there's any vertical elements or really any curb lines that fully need to change, that's something that would be separate. But Lynn and I have talked as well about the upcoming, influx of funding for the
for the next year's pavement rehab program. And we're going to probably end up getting some consultant help to be able to really fully look through all those roadway sections and see what improvements can be made. And then we also have a bi-monthly bike ped coordination meeting with different city staff. So we have public works and planning and pros and communications and probably other people I'm forgetting, who are all in that meeting. And we actually go over each planned section with the overlay in that too, and get feedback from others. So that's a great point, and that's something that I think we really do need to do with the next program. But if bigger items are needed, then those will be budgeted in separately, like Cindy said.
Okay. I mean, like, are there any ever scenarios where you have, a proposal for the resurfacing, but it might require vertical elements to fully realize? Because I'm just wondering if there are ways we can, supplement the funding that we've already approved where appropriate, for places where it would actually just make sense to just make a full transition as opposed to just handle striping changes. That's kind of more the direction that I wanted to push in, since we have this great opportunity and we're gonna we actually have the funding now to take care of large swaths of the city in one shot. So
maybe to respond to that, Councilmember Marcano, and then Councilmember Murillo, your comments on, what are some, I'm going to say, short-term wins that we can get. We actually have what we call a design development meeting between planning and public works. And I think if you could give us some time to get that group together, we meet every other week, and let us brainstorm all of these items that we've discussed here today. And then we can come back to you with some options that we think might be viable or quick wins. I don't know. Mindy, I don't know if would that work for you and Mac as well?
Sure, we'll make it work. Yeah.
Okay.
right.
So that'll let us kind of digest everything you've said. Let us think about it a little bit and come back with some proposals.
All right, thank you. And I want to be respectful of our time because I'm rambling again. So,
All right.
all right, thank you so much. Sorry, this is
Very
just.
briefly.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to make a plug for additional traffic calming funds, possibly even in a supplemental, which I think Carly said is under discussion already for this year. And when we had our conversation, it was clear that even for this year, traffic calming is kind of over allocated. And so this is a program that I think really can help with the types of improvements that have been under discussion, and also serve needs that our constituents have expressed. And so I just want to make that plug, that we look at the possibility of allocating additional funds for traffic calming even for this year, in addition to making the ask for more funds for next year. And then also highlighting what Councilmember Marcano had on one of the slides, which is looking at our strip centers. I know we've had the whole controversy over East Bank, and that's, I don't want to relitigate that whole thing, but I do think that we have a lot of strip centers that might be really good opportunities for finding these types of quick wins. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. And that's it. Thanks, Gil.
Thank you, Councilmember Coombs. All right, and yeah, just to Cindy, Carly, Matt, anyone else who might have any questions or want some more clarity on this, just please reach out to us. This is something I can talk to y'all all day about. So yeah, and hopefully with a little more focus. It's such a big, thing that I have such a hard time separating it out into separate pieces. But yeah, so thank y'all for bearing with us there. I hope that was informative for y'all to kind of see the direction we want things to progress in. All right, so moving on to agenda item 5, miscellaneous matters. Does anybody have any miscellaneous matters?
Nope.
No. All right. What do we anticipate then for our next meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Marcano. So we've got 3 things that we feel pretty confident are going to make it, and I apologize, 2 actually slid from the last time I talked about them. So 13th Avenue update,
Okay.
We anticipated that today, but we did slide it. We're continuing to refine that. Also, the 2021-2022 snow report. And then we also have a Peoria crossing bridge maintenance IGA with Denver. That one's been a long time coming.
Okay.
As you know, the bridge is probably, if you've been up there, been open for quite a while. So we're glad to see that come to completion. And then we have a tentative on Highline Canal maintenance IGA with CDOT. So depending on how far we get with CDOT, we may have that one for July. It may slide.
Okay. Oh, Victor, actually, this reminds me, because I don't think we ever got follow-up on it. The savings that we realized from the 9 Mile Bridge with the supplemental funding from the federal government, where did we ever land on that discussion? Because I think I had made the ask to see if we could directly put that towards sidewalk infill in other parts of Ward 4, since that was to supplement the point. And I know that we already dealt with sidewalk infill from a grant standpoint at our last council meeting, but I wanted to know where that tranche of money specifically was at.
Sure. So at the moment, that remains in the 9 Mile project. Updated cost estimates from our consultant team show that even with the influx of the federal money, we're probably going to come in either right on point or a tad under, just because of the material increase that we're seeing across the board. So we haven't moved that money yet for fear of between inflation, material costs and delays, making sure that we don't sell ourselves short when we go to add on that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. All right.
Councilmember Marcano, sorry, it's Karen.
No,
I'm
go
always
ahead,
jumping
Karen.
in. I have been working with CDOT. Mike King over there is responsible for nominating corridors that would be alternative fuel corridors. And we only can get federal infrastructure money for alternative fuel corridors. And so we may need some leadership support to get I-225 nominated. And so it sounds like July might be busy, but maybe August, to have them come and talk to you about the nomination process, because we will need your support if we go forward.
Okay.
Would that be something that's okay to put on?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank
I think
you.
we have a very friendly committee for that. So yes.
Okay, good.
All right. Great. And then our next meeting, July 28th, between 1 and 2:30. Does that work for everybody? Councilmember Coombs? Murillo?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Murillo? Oh, did she drop off? Oh yeah, she did drop off, but I'll assume that the same time slot will work for her. So, alrighty. And with that, I want to thank you all for the discussion, and we are adjourned. I'll catch y'all soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.